Hello, my name is Laura Beauvais-Godwin, and I'm the director of the Nightlight South Carolina office. And with me is Rhonda Jarema, and she's the director of support services for the California office and for Nightlight in general. And today we are here to talk about what is a home study. Rhonda, you want to tell us a little bit about what is a home study?
A home study is basically the way we look at your family to determine, are you really ready to bring a child into your home? So we are looking at your fingerprints, certainly, and we're doing some evaluation of you through various means, checking your birth certificates, marriage certificates, that sort of thing. But basically, it's only about 30% evaluation. And truly, 70% of the home study process is education. We truly value education at Nightlight and want to ensure that you are as well prepared to bring a child into your home as possible. So we really emphasize education.
Okay, basically what we're going to cover in this outline, in this webinar, as opposed to the other webinar that we've conducted in which we talk about what's in a home study, and that's basically the subjects that are covered in a home study and the documentation, the supporting documentation that's required. We want to kind of give you an overview of what you can expect during the home study process. And we mentioned what must be demonstrated, that we want you to make sure that you are well evaluated as well as well educated, and we'll discuss a little bit further on that. Who meets with you, and the documents a little bit that we're going to discuss what's required, some of the special issues that need to be addressed, and then we're also going to cover the different types of home studies. There's the domestic home study, and under that is also embryo adoption home studies, as well as the international home studies, and under that are Hague Country home studies. Rhonda, tell what ultimately must be shown when you have a home study, what we're ultimately looking for.
Basically, we're looking to make sure that you are ready in all aspects of your life. We want to make sure that physically you're in good health, that emotionally you're ready to bring a child into your home, that things are stable in your family, and that you also have the emotional preparation to deal with the changes that are going to occur when you do bring a child into your home. We want to make sure that you are good parents ready to roll with this new child.
And one thing here at Nightlight is that we understand that everyone does not come from a perfect background, and we know that if you've lived a little of life, you've had problems. And we look at your strengths and your weaknesses. For example, if you've been to counseling or that you've had maybe a divorce in the past or some other kind of issue, that we want to say, how has that made you stronger? And we also want to look at, ultimately, what will make you a good parent.
We look at the challenges you faced in your life to make sure that you really have good coping skills. And if you're having some struggles, that we help you find some resources so that you can resolve that before you proceed with your adoption.
And some of this will be discussed in the meetings that we do have with you. We are required to have at least 2 meetings with you, and of course this is called a home study, so therefore at least one of them we will be meeting in your home.
Typically our first meeting is getting to know you. We want to find out what makes you tick, why you've decided to proceed with adoption, and how we can best work together. We want to find out about your family and who's living in your home and what kind of activities you like. We also look at your response to the education that you've proceeded with. And then we have individual visits where we learn more about your family and of origin as well as your current family. We also want to, when we're visiting your home, we are not looking to do a white glove test. We're basically making sure that your home is prepared and ready to add a child. We also talk about what it's like to bring a child into your home.
And of course, as she mentioned, that we're going to meet with all the family members and we're talking with you, and we also meet with each one of you individually as well. There are two basic types of home studies. One is domestic. That's a child that's born here in the United States. So that can include an embryo adoption. It can include an infant domestic, although infant domestic can also be an older child placed privately. But in general, most birth mothers are placing infants for adoption. And then a child through the foster care system. And then there are those children who come from overseas in an international adoption. And as of the year 2008, the United States had ratified what's called the Hague Convention on Intercountry Adoption. So some home studies must be done in accordance with the Hague Convention when you are adopting from a Hague country. And such a country would be China, for example, or India. Then there are still many non-Hague countries such as Ethiopia, Taiwan, and Russia. When you are having a domestic home study conducted, it is the least complicated of home studies, and it must comply with the requirements not only of the state in which you reside, but also the state in which your child is born. Oftentimes when you're having a home study done, you don't know necessarily where your child is going to be born. You may be matched with a birth mother from another state. So, for example, if you reside here in South Carolina and your child is born in Ohio, then your home study is also going to have to comply with the requirements of the state of Ohio. And also, an attorney or agency in that state, for example, of Ohio, would also review your home study to make sure it's also in compliance. But we at Nightlight really try to make sure that our home studies, as much as possible, comply with virtually any requirement that would be asked from any state. We do a very thorough home study so that it doesn't become a surprise all of a sudden that something else or another document needs to be gathered. Another important issue in domestic adoption is the domestic adoption education. And I am an adoptive mom twice through domestic adoption, and I know for me openness in adoption was a very important issue. And there's some wonderful books that we do recommend and require that you do read regarding openness in adoption. And again, we don't make every family have an open adoption because not every birth mom is open to that, but we want you to be open to openness. We also help you talk about meeting the birth mom, because oftentimes that's what will happen, and about attaching to your child and talking to your child about adoption issues as well as transracial and transcultural issues. You want to talk just a little bit about what the California office offers as well, Rhonda?
Absolutely. We have a class on domestic adoption decisions. This is a seminar that we hold at our office that features a panel of adoptive parents and birth mothers. We found that families really get so much out of this experience, being able to hear directly from birth mothers who have made adoption decisions for their children, as well as from other adoptive families. And to see the relationship and to hear about how effective and how wonderful it's been for the families has been really productive. We also have a class on lifelong issues of adoption, and we find that our families really benefit from this class as well. It's attended by both our domestic and international families, and they're able to talk about the issues that occur to all parties in the adoption equation, both the placing birth family as well as the adoptive family and the adoptees. And that, too, is a really wonderful class that stimulates a lot of discussion and thought in terms of understanding that adoption doesn't stop with the actual act of adoption, but goes on as a lifelong process.
And because we do believe that obviously adoption is a lifelong process, and I can tell you, as an adoptive mom, and my girls are in 20 and 22, that it's still there are issues that you deal with. They're very positive issues, but nonetheless there are issues that we deal with that we want to make sure that we have support for you afterwards. In both the California office and the South Carolina office, we do provide post-adoption support groups free of charge to our families. Sometimes families want to know, where's my home study going to go, because this is a lot of personal information in here. And, of course, we write it with the fact in mind that a lot of people are going to be reading it and making an evaluation on you, but who have never met you. So we need to include as much information about you so that they can get a good picture of you. Because when you get to meet someone, you get to talk to them, you really get to feel like you really know them. And we want to make sure that our writing is expressing what we are also getting to know about you face to face. So an attorney or placing agency is also going to read your home study. So if a child comes from another state, then the attorney there or the placing agency in that state is also going to see your home study. Sometimes the birth mother may see the home study as well. Sometimes it is what we call sanitized. And then a judge will, of course, will also review your home study when you go to court for the finalization of your adoption. When you are adopting from one state to another, say, for example, from South Carolina to North Carolina, your home study will go through what's called interstate compact on the placement of children. And that is an office that is in the social services office of each state. And all children who cross state lines must have the paperwork approved by the ICPC staff. In California, actually, an agency can actually do this, but in all other states, it is an actual office. And so when you're adopting from one state to the other, for example, again, you live in South Carolina, Nightlight has done your home study, and your child is born in North Carolina, then the office in ICPC office in North Carolina and in South Carolina must approve your home study and other paperwork before that you could return to South Carolina with your baby. So you always want to have your home study in good order, because oftentimes there are situations in which we may call you to tell you about a baby who is born, or of a situation, especially if you're interested in a little bit older child. Of course, the child is already born, and sometimes these circumstances in which maybe the birth mom wants to meet you, or some other relatives want to meet you, or an agency has a custody of a child, we can't say, oh, yes, your home study is sort of ready, or it has been done, but it's not up to date. Sometimes we have to act very quickly, and especially if you're going into another state. So you want to keep your home study up to date at all times. In addition to that, you want supporting documentation to be up to date at all times. So you don't want to let your criminal clearances, for example, expire, or your doctor's letter expire. And as I mentioned before, the home study and the paperwork must comply with both states. So you want to make sure that your home study is very thorough, and it can be changed as needed. As I mentioned before, sometimes a birth mom or birth family wants to see the home study, and if it's just a preliminary type of birth mother and you feel that you're not comfortable with someone seeing any identifying information, we can go ahead and produce what's called a sanitized home study, where we take out identifying information. A lot of times families, of course, ask us, how long does it go ahead and take to have a home study completed, a domestic home study? It generally takes us about 4 to 8 weeks to complete. Sometimes it can take longer, particularly if you take a long time to get your documentation in, or if you are very slow in getting the education done. We really want to see most of the education completed when the home study is completed. However, sometimes families come to us and say, we have a birth mom and she is due in, say, 6 weeks or whatever. We can go ahead and have that expedited, but that is the exception and not the rule, because we want you to be as well prepared as possible. All right, and then another question that families do ask us is, how long is the home study current? In California and South Carolina, it's good for 1 year. In North Carolina, for example, it's good for 18 months. Arkansas, it's good for 5 years. And as I mentioned before, your documents need to be up to date. So in South Carolina and California, that the documents that are supporting, again, like the criminal record, the doctor's letter, your letters of reference, those must be also under 1 year old as well. All right, embryo adoption, and I know this is a new concept for a lot of families. It is the donation of when someone has donated embryos in storage from one family to another family. That is the actual adoption taking place, and it's a contractual agreement. And Nightlight has conducted more than 200 adoptions in the last 10 years. And the home study is much like a domestic home study. The issues discussed are also related to openness because oftentimes there's an open relationship between the donating genetic family and the adoptive family. We also want to look at issues such as honesty and telling the child of the circumstances of adoption. And those are some of the key issues that we will be addressing in addition to the typical type of issues that we would be addressing in the domestic home study. And again, it's very much like a domestic home study because a lot of the issues are still the same. And where does the home study go for embryo adoption? Primarily just your placing agency, such as Nightlight, is a placing agency for embryo adoption. And of course, and if you are working with another organization, of course, we would be sending it there as well. And by the way, if you're looking to do an embryo adoption and also considering domestic adoption, they're very easy to interchange these adoptions. I've even had families who've said we're not exactly sure which direction we're going to go. And one thing I do want to let you know, too, that Rhonda was mentioning about sitting down initially talking to the family. A lot of times when we sit down and talk with the family about the home study and the home study process, this is when families often make a decision about what type of adoption that they want to do. So you may even find that during the home study process, through the educational process, through the reading, you may decide after researching an issue, you may say, this is not the right kind of home adoption for us. We'd like to change our home study, and we'd like to go in a little bit different direction for adoption. Then there's the international home study. Do you want to talk about what the country requirements may have?
Sure.
As related to the home study?
Absolutely. Different countries actually have different requirements related to the home study. Now, certainly China looks at the weight of the family, of the pre-adoptive parents. They look at how the length of marriage. They look at various characteristics, as does Russia and Taiwan. But they all have different qualities that they are actually looking at, different requirements. Some will look at the net worth of the family. Well, actually all countries look at the net worth, but their requirements are actually different. They want to ensure that you haven't had a criminal history. Certainly some individuals might have done something as perhaps a teenager or a college student. All of this will come up in your fingerprints, and so it's important that you're honest with your social worker and reveal everything. But certainly we understand that there have been mistakes. Some countries will not allow any issues of violating the law, and other countries are more willing to look at the length of time between the incident and what kind of lifestyle you currently lead. Certainly they want to ensure that there's no psychiatric issues, and so if someone is taking psychotropic drugs, many countries will not accept that. Also, if someone is receiving active treatment for cancer, for example, they will not be accepted with one of the international countries. Certainly if someone has a history of cancer in the past but is healthy now, there are some countries that will consider allowing them to adopt. So it really varies between countries, so it's important to know that when looking at a country. You can look online to see what your country is looking for in terms of requirements, or certainly we can help you identify that.
And again, we will work with you, and oftentimes families who are well qualified may not qualify for a specific country because either they're too overweight or they may be taking psychotropic drugs, but in fact they would qualify for either another country program or they may decide to go ahead with a domestic adoption. And if you have a situation that you feel like is less than ideal in your background or for some reason you don't qualify, please talk to us. We want to work with you. And again, as I mentioned, that you may need to consider another country or domestic program.
We want to make sure that you understand the risks of adoption, that certainly when you are looking at an international country, the laws of that country could change at any moment. And truly, we have no ability to determine that. That's not something that we have any control over. That is done through the other country. We do our best to anticipate any changes and work along with you and try and help you to understand the risks that are involved with international adoption. Certainly another risk is that there are no perfectly healthy children out there. And particularly when you have a child coming from institutionalized care, there are going to be some additional issues related to that. It doesn't mean that the child will not be able to resolve some of those issues. It doesn't mean that the child cannot be successful in a home. Certainly, my husband and I have adopted 5 children internationally very successfully. So certainly we have had some issues, as with any child. But I think it is important to understand that the key truly is being prepared and understanding that with international adoption, well, with any adoption truly, you cannot be in complete control. And it's important to understand that.
Sometimes when you are adopting a child from another country, the child will have special needs, and particularly with our China program, there are often children, most of the children who are available are going to have some type of special needs, and we call these waiting children. Sometimes they're minor and correctable issues, but nonetheless, in the home study, we have to have very specific wording regarding the special needs of the child. And so you want to make sure of this. You want to discuss this with the person who's your home study provider, as broad as you feel that you can go regarding the special needs. Because, again, if you don't indicate a special need and your child happens to have that, then the home study has to be readjusted and resubmitted. And so this does save us a lot of time and effort, and you a lot of time and effort, if we can go ahead and talk through these. And again, it amounts to really being well educated on certain issues. And sometimes it's also saying, no, I'm really not comfortable with this, and that's okay. We don't want to stretch anyone beyond their capabilities or their comfort level, but yet we want you to know that you must go ahead. The wording must be very specific regarding this, even in terms of infectious diseases such as tuberculosis or hepatitis B. If your child happens to test positive for that, your home study must have approved you for a child with that condition. And not every child is obviously going to have that, but again, it's better to err on the side of caution and be approved for that, again, if that's what you're comfortable with and that's what your home study provider is comfortable approving you for as well. You want to talk about criminal history? We've talked a lot about criminal history, but it's always worth repeating. Because obviously there are a lot of people do have some kind of little something in their past. So,
and certainly that does not mean that you will not be able to adopt. I think it's important to look at what kind of issues have occurred in your past. You know, certainly if they are minor, they're misdemeanors, it should not be an issue. But if you do have a felony in your past, that could potentially be an issue. And certainly if you have any issue related to children, that might prevent you from adopting. If there's been any abuse of children, then you would not be allowed to proceed with adoption. It is important to think about what's gone on in your past. I've had families that forgot things because when they were teenagers or young adults, and they don't remember until they get the notice. And I think they probably remembered but figured, oh, it was when I was young, I was told that it would disappear from my records and it wouldn't be an issue in the future. Well, in fact, international adoption gets a very, very fine screen with your fingerprints. And so if you've done anything in your past, believe me, it will show up. And as your social worker or your case manager doing your home study, that person needs to know everything that's gone on in your past. As embarrassing as it might be, it's still much easier to deal with up front. When your home study provider finds out after the fact that you've had a problem in your past that you did not reveal, that truly can be the end of your home study, and you can be denied for that. So you really want to be upfront and honest with your home study provider, because they can help you work through this and help explain it in a way that is understandable, particularly as we are able to show, the progress and the understanding that you've made, as you've grown in your life. Anything that you've done in your past, we would need court disposition, something from the court verifying what happened and what the consequences were. Again, this is for the international home study, and it would be required for every incident. The home study provider does not necessarily know the exact incident. They're provided just with a very general letter. So it is important that you're very upfront with them, because this information is required to be in the home study. And the folks that are reviewing your home study with our federal government, they do have the specifics. And if they don't see that this has been addressed in your home study, this would be a major issue. They also expect to see a signed letter providing your explanation of what happened and what you've learned from the incident.
And just want to also say that also, at least in South Carolina through our social services, we are on the side of caution, and if anything is in the section, on the criminal history section, even if not only did you quote-unquote commit a crime, but even if you've been the victim of certain kinds of abuse or a crime or domestic abuse, then we also need a letter from you explaining this. And I know this is, again, very sensitive for families, particularly those who have been victims, but again, it just protects everyone, and it lets us hear it from your point of view as well. So if you have committed a crime, even no matter how minor it is, you will also be asked to write a letter to explain this. And again, as Rhonda was saying, that whatever you tell us, it has to match up with what immigration is seeing from the FBI. There shouldn't be any disparity. So that's why it's really good to let us know. And the other thing I like for families to do, too, is when they call us and maybe even set up a first appointment, or if they have something in their background and they're a little hesitant, it's so good just to get this out of the way right up front, because then we could have a lot more fun with the home study. We could talk about all your assets. We could talk about what you do, what your hobbies are, everything else that makes you who you are. We don't want you to be defined by one bad judgment or something bad that happened to you in your life. We want it to be well beyond that. And sometimes if a situation means that you're disqualified for a certain country, we want you to be able to move on from there, and we want you to get going in another program. So again, we really want to work with you with this. And very seldom does anyone ever get denied on a home study. Usually people self-screen out first. If we really feel like you are not qualified and you're really honest right up front, we can tell you may not qualify. But very seldom do we go to someone's home and conduct a home study and the family doesn't qualify. Now, of course, it does happen, but again, very seldom. All right, when you have an international home study, you may ask, where does that home study go? Who is reviewing it? Well, if you're in South Carolina, our social service department must review the home study, and they do this relatively quickly. It only takes a couple of weeks, mostly because it's actually in the mailroom, not being reviewed by the person. She does it very quickly. And then they would go ahead and send it on to the NBC, which is part of immigration now. And that's where all home studies go. And there they look at the home study along with your FBI clearances. And again, as Rhonda said, we do not see your FBI clearances that are sent to immigration, and these go through with a very fine-tooth comb. So even we may not see anything on a record through a state clearance because it would only be going through the FBI. Also then your home study goes on to what's called the National Visa Center, where then they review everything, and then they send on the immigration approval and your home study onto the embassy or consulate that's affiliated with your child's country. So, for example, if you're adopting from China, your home study is going to go to the National Visa Center, and then they will send a wire over to the consulate of Guangzhou in China. And then, of course, your home study is also sent to the country authorities via your placing agency. And again, if you are adopting from China, then we would go ahead and through a translator have the document translated, and then it would be sent to the CCAA of China. People do ask, how long is my home study good for? How long is it current? Now, with international adoptions, it depends on what kind of a home study you have had done. When your home study is submitted to immigration, the home study itself must be less than 6 months old, as well as the supporting documents. So when you have a home study, for example, in South Carolina, the documents may include, for example, your doctor's letter, your tax returns, those sort of documents, letters of reference, again, all under 6 months old. Once it's at immigration, your FBI clearances are received, and then the home study is good until your immigration approval expires, and that's good for 18 months. So you could see why they want a home study under 6 months old, because once you're approved from that point onward, your immigration is 18 months old. Therefore, your home study is going to be good for almost 2 years when you're adopting from a non-Hague country. Your fingerprints do expire after 15 months, so those must be retaken. So, for example, if your home study was approved on December 15, 2009 last year, and then it was dated in January, your approval for 2010, January 2010, your approval then is good until July of 2012. And if your immigration, just to give you when to update your home study, let me give you some other examples. If your immigration approval were to be expiring February 24th, 2011, then you would need to submit a home study when you're going ahead and updating it, that is. Then you'd have 3 months from the time that it's going to expire to send it in so that your immigration approval does not expire. So if your home study immigration approval was going to expire on February 24th, 2011, in a few months, then you would need to submit your home study from November 24th, 2012 to February 23rd, 2011.
And it really is important not to wait until February 23rd, but to submit it really early, just in case there's a problem with the mail or something.
Right, and my dates are actually a little off here. There's a typographical error here. It really is basically 15 months after your immigration has been approved. You can't do it too soon. You don't want to wait, and you don't want to wait till that 23rd for sure on it. And actually, it would be, if it's going to expire, then that's right. Then it would be from November 24th, 2010. That's right, to February 23rd, 2011. However, you don't want, as Rhonda was saying, you don't want to wait till the last minute to do that. So you want to make sure that you do have it well within that time, because then it is free, which is the wonderful thing about renewing your immigration approval. Now, just because immigration is free does not mean the update of your home study is free. Your agency may provide a reduced fees. We do at Nightlight do the home study update free of a reduced fee, but it is not free of charge. All right, then there's the Hague home study. Hagues are certain countries, such as I mentioned before, China, India, the Philippines. Some agencies require all home studies to be Hague compliant. In Nightlight, for the most part, our home studies are almost virtually Hague compliant. It is sent to the National Benefits Center, the NBC. You must have a placing agency selected when you do that, and then you must state the placing agency on what's called an I-800A form when you are applying for an international adoption with immigration. And as Rhonda mentioned before, that you must be very honest about your criminal background and about anything really related to your family. And it's called the duty of candor and the duty to disclose. Now, do we only require that for Hague home studies? No. We really require that for all of our home studies, even domestic home studies. Obviously, we want you to be honest with us. Education must be documented. Again, Nightlight still requires that for all of its home studies, that we document the education. The home studies going to the NBC, the National Benefits Center, as to the country, same home study. We do the same thing for all our countries. The only real difference that we have is that the child abuse background check must be for every place that you've lived since you were 18 years old. This includes living overseas. And we don't require this for all families adopting domestically or if you're adopting from a non-Hague country, because oftentimes it is burdensome to do this, although we do ask for child abuse backgrounds, for example, for places that you've lived in the last 5 to 10 years, but not since you've been 18 years old. In addition, the finances must be well documented as well as other matters. Again, we want to be very careful with all our families. So pretty much our international home studies are the same as for our Hague home studies. And then there are the educational requirements. You want to share with us that, Rhonda?
Sure, absolutely. With a Hague country adoption, one of the requirements is to ensure that the families are fully educated. That was one of the big reasons for implementing the Hague process, because it was felt that families were not getting sufficient education. Certainly we've always provided that at Nightlight, and so providing a Hague education program really wasn't that much different from what we already provided. It's important through a Hague home study, but really through any home study, that you understand country-specific information about where you're adopting. You want to know about the country of your child's origin, because that's going to be important for the rest of your lives together, to value their culture. You want to understand the laws of that country. You want to understand what kind of conditions your child experienced as they lived in that country, and what the impact of leaving the only home that they've known might have on that child. We look at the effects of institutionalization on a child and how that can affect a child's development, perhaps causing some delays. We look at attachment disorders. Certainly it's important to understand that every child coming here is going to have to learn to trust their parents. And that's a critical part of attachment, learning to trust another person. And we work with our families and want you to understand just what that might entail in terms of dealing with your own attachment issues, as well as helping you to facilitate attachment with your newly adopted child. It's important to understand that there are going to be some delays in the adoption, both through the other country, as they might have holidays that may delay your process, or even laws that could change mid-process. And that is just one of the things with international adoption that we can always count on is change, and that is something that we see very often. It's important to understand that there are cultural issues in adopting a child from another country, that it's important that you honor your child's culture and make that culture part of your own family culture, so that your child feels that they truly are accepted in your family. Every country has various different required reports that they ask for following the adoption, to let them know how your child is doing. They are not wondering about, they're not there to interfere in your parenting style, but to get verification that your child really is thriving and doing well. And if you are having issues, that you are following up on them and you're trying to get help and trying to help your child in whatever way is necessary in order for them to be successful in your family. We also look at any medical or other issues that are associated with a particular country, so that too is something that the family is well educated about. Truly, the key is to go in with a full understanding. I've had families say, "Why do you focus on all these negative issues?" And you know, we talk about positive things as well, certainly. But we do try to give a lot of worst-case scenario so that you hear it first from us, because we give not only that, but we also give interventions and ways to resolve these issues, because we do want you to be as prepared as possible.
How long does the home study take to complete? A lot of it depends on the family. When you complete your education, when you've submitted all your paperwork, as I said before, with the domestic adoption, and also it can take even longer if the child abuse records are coming from another country and they must be ordered. So sometimes we have limited control on that. So certainly if you have lived in another country since 18 years old, just to remember that it may take a little bit longer to get those child abuse records. And the home study for an international adoption cannot be expedited just because there are so many documents and other issues that must be addressed. All right, all these great dates and trying to explain to you how long is the Hague Home Study current for. As I mentioned before, the home study must be less than 6 months old when the National Benefits Center receives it. And that, again, includes all the documentation that goes with it. It must all be under 6 months old. Once it's at the NBC, it is good until your fingerprints clearance expires, and that's 15 months. So if your home study is approved on December 15th, 2010, and your fingerprints were taken on December 5th, then your immigration approval is going to be dated. For example, they say, okay, they wait a little while and they send it out January 25th, 2010. Your immigration is only good till March 4th, 2012. That is 15 months after December 5th. For example, I had a family the other day who got fingerprinted because their child was very special needs. They actually got immigration approval the same day that they had their fingerprints taken, which is very, very seldom done. And their immigration approval is good for 15 months from the date that they got fingerprinted. Most of the time that's not going to happen. So what that means for most families is that your immigration approval is only going to be good for about 1 year from the time that you actually get approved, especially if it takes a month or two after you get fingerprinted for them to send you the approval. So it could be about a year or just a little over a year that it's actually good for. And again, you can get it updated free of charge. One more time, and again, you need to do that within that 3-month window before it's going to head in and expire.
But again, the home study update, there will be a charge for that.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, there will be. One of the happy part of our adoptions, for everyone's adoption, is the post-adoption, post-placement. If your adoption is not finalized overseas, or if your adoption is finalized overseas, the post-adoption report. Or if you've done a domestic home study once your child is in your home, that would be a post-placement report because your child is not adopted. We come to visit your child after your child is in the home, but before you actually finalize your adoption. And you want to tell us about what kind of things that we are looking for? Now, of course, it does depend on the kind of adoption that you have done.
Absolutely. Well, certainly we want to see that your home study provider is out there within the first month. We want to come out to your home and help you because the first month seems to be the most challenging for most families because that's a time of real adjustment. You've gone from not having this child to suddenly having this child that's come from another country. And so this child really feels like he or she has landed on Mars and is trying to fit in and be a Martian. And that takes some time to adjust to. And you, too, are dealing with some adjustments because certainly this child may be different in their needs than any other child that you've had in your home, a birth child, or what perhaps friends or family have experienced, again, because of the fact that they are coming from another country. And so we want to be there and help you through the most challenging part, the first month. And then each country has various regulations that we follow in terms of when we might have additional visits. Some visits take place, you can have several visits within the first year, and other countries have visits that are spread out over a number of years. Regardless of the requirements of your country, we want you to know that we are here for you and are here to support you in your adoption.
So where do you begin? Every adoption begins with a home study. You can't get very far in any type of adoption. In fact, you can't even begin most adoptions until you have a home study. So this is critical. Well, first of all, it's a good idea to make a phone call and to begin the process of adoption and talk to us about maybe what programs you may qualify, what types of adoption that you would like to do. Become educated. Read books on adoptions. Check out websites. Go to seminars, workshops, webinars. We have a great list of resources which you can check out from our website. You can download that and then start going on some websites and looking at and maybe ordering some books related to adoption so that you begin to feel really comfortable with adoption and adoption language. And you may want to do this even before you begin the home study process. In the meantime, if you have no idea where your marriage certificate is or your birth certificate, you may want to actually start collecting some of these vital records so that you can have them on hand for starting the home study process. Get some photos of self and family. That's not usually too hard with the digital age. And then even asking some friends for references. And again, we can guide you on that. You can also go to our website, www.nightlight.org, and there you can also download our home study packages, and there we can actually tell you what is required for the home study and the types of documents that you do need, and that's very helpful. And you are very free to go ahead and contact us. We're here to help you. If you're interested in a home study and you live in California, you'll want to contact Rhonda at nightlight.org. Out of the South Carolina office, Erin Jenkins coordinates our home studies, and you could reach her at erinj@nightlight, and feel free to contact me, Laura, at Nightlight. Thank you very much for joining us.